hope that you will enjoy them and maybe take something home with you today that you can do in this next week, in this next month, and so on. And if you would like to donate to their ministry, there are missions envelopes at the back, and they'll be available to speak to afterwards. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having us. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be in the book of Acts, chapter 4, verses 1 to 14. If you've got your Bible with you, just take a moment, open up to Acts chapter 4, verses 1 to 14. And in this passage, we see Peter and John have gone to the temple in Jerusalem, and they meet a crippled man, crippled from birth at the gate, beautiful. And they heal this man, and he's dancing and leaping, and it causes quite a scene. And that's where our story opens up here in Acts chapter 4, verses 1 to 14. As Peter and John, that is, as they were speaking to the people, the priests, the captain of the guard, temple guard, and the Sadducees came up to them, being greatly disturbed, because they were teaching the people and proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection from the dead. And they laid hands on them and put them in jail until the next day, for it was already evening. But many of those who had heard the message believed, and the number of the men came to about 5,000. On the next day, their rulers, elders, and scribes were gathered together in Jerusalem. And Annas the high priest was there, and Caiaphas, and John, and Alexander, and all who were of high priestly descent. When they had placed them in the center of this group, they began to inquire, "By what power or in what name have you done this?" And Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, "Rulers and elders of the people, if we are on trial today for a benefit or an act of kindness done to a sick man as to how this man has been made well, let it be known to you all, that to all the people of Israel, that by the name of Jesus Christ, the Nazarene, whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead, by this name this man stands before you in good health. And he is the stone which was rejected by you, the builders, but which has become the chief cornerstone. And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven that is given among men by which we must be saved." Now, as they observed the confidence, as they observed the courage of Peter and John, and understood that they were uneducated and untrained men, they were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. And seeing the man who had been healing standing with them, they had nothing to say in reply.
I reckon.
They saw the courage of Peter and John and recognized that they were untrained and unschooled men. And today we're going to take you on a journey and tell you some stories of untrained, unschooled men and women whom God used and left the authorities speechless. But first, a little quick intro.
So just to remind you, or if you've never met us, we are Steve and Amie. We have 2 sons. And next slide. And so our youngest is on the left. That's Micah. He just turned 28 this week. Our oldest is Justin on the right. Micah lives in Washington State. Justin in Indianapolis. These guys are amazing, living their lives with great integrity, and we are very, very impressed with them. Reminder where we live. So here's a map of Southeast Asia. You can see Thailand in the middle, that green country. That circle is Northeast Thailand. That's the area we focus on, in addition to the country next to it, which is Laos. And we live at the end of that arrow there, right on the border between Thailand and Laos. And if you look here, our house is 300 yards, next slide, from the Mekong River. So this is the view that we get every morning when we go out running, walking, or actually swimming in the river. The last 8 years have been filled with directly training thousands, and we do mean thousands, of ESON pastors and church members. We've trained people how to share their faith in villages that don't have churches. We've trained people how to engage families, not individuals. We have trained people how to gather into discipleship groups and how to train up new leaders in those groups so that they begin to carry out the functions of church and how to be a church, right? And then finally, how to train these groups of people to go out and start new churches themselves. So our end vision, right, is a church in every sub-district of Northeast Thailand, that whole green area, and the good news of Jesus personally presented to every person, not in a group like this, but one-on-one or one in family. That's how we would tell people about Jesus, we and those we train.
So this end vision describes the future state. It's where everything's headed. A church in every sub-district, the gospel personally presented to every person. That movement of disciples making disciples starts with a leader who equips a leader who equips a leader. And this picture illustrates that, where I met, we'll call Rough Rider Ninja in the middle there, and I equipped him in the process and principles of starting churches and commissioned him to go reach a group of people in central Laos. And Rough Rider Ninja there went and formed a missionary band, a group of pioneer church planters from local Christians there. And that's the next leader, if you will. That's his Barnabas. That's his local Barnabas. And so that Barnabas and Ninja, they went off and they started churches that started churches in that unreached people group until they had several hundred baptized believers after about 3 years, and had formed a number of new churches in that group. Finally, in 2016, I took that team to the capital city in the country of Laos, and we met with the president of the Lao Church, the denomination over all Protestants in the country.
There's only one.
There's only one denomination. And presented the case study. He was delighted and said, when can you come and train all of our national leaders throughout the country? And so we set a date, and this photo is at that first training. And at the end of that first 2-day training, the president said, this is all we're going to do. We're going to make disciples. We're going to be good disciples, and we're going to equip disciples. So whatever your ministry focus, you're going to be graded on whether you made a disciple and the people you worked with, did they go on and do the same? And so at the end, so I hosted a series of trainings throughout that next year where we trained the national leaders, and they in turn trained the church leaders, pastors of all the churches in the country, about 900 churches at that time. And we had a special focus on going to people groups or languages where there are no known Christians. And so that was the start of what we could call a church multiplication movement throughout Laos. And as things stand today, that movement of disciples making disciples has pioneered churches in just a little over 100 different people groups. And we see a number of churches planted to the 4th generation in different provinces of the country. In 2024 alone, just last year, a little over 250,000 people heard the gospel at face-to-face in a small group setting. And of that 250,000, about 20,000 made a profession of faith. And that doesn't count larger events like from a stage. Franklin Graham even had a crusade there last December, first time ever. And not counting the stage events, but families and small group settings, we saw over 250,000, a little over 20,000 come to faith. So this map, you'll see a bunch of greens, and these are all the districts of the country of Laos. And so if it's a really dark green, don't worry about the numbers. And so if it's a really dark green, what that means is we've reached a 4th generation church plant. Great-great-granddaughter church. If it's a little lighter green, that means there's 2nd or 3rd generation. If it's the lightest green, that means there's at least one or more than one 1st generation or daughter church that's been started there since 2018. If it's red, there's probably nothing going on, or we just don't have any information about what's going on in that place. So in 2024, a little over 1,000 new discipleship groups are started of seekers, new believers around the country. And in the month of April, I've been getting photos sent through social media of baptisms in Laos. These are a couple of those photos. So just in the month of April, I would say every maximum of 3 days, there's a baptism going on somewhere around the movement. So that's kind of the feel. That's what it looks like when you see a movement happening. These people are leading others to faith, and they're starting churches in other parts of the country. And all of these folks really are ordinary, unschooled people like Peter and John that we read about in Acts 4:13. The Lao movement's going great, and my involvement there has decreased. My involvement has been helping them send people into Northeast Thailand and build on their expertise to help reach Northeast Thailand. And this map, this graphic that I made kind of illustrates where is the manpower, okay? The workers are few, but the harvest is great. That is, the number of people really hungry and interested is a lot, but the people who are going to go out and tell them about Jesus are very few.
And by the way, that's true right here in Oscoda County as well.
Yeah. How many are really willing to go down the road,
There
tell
are
your cousins,
people
your neighbors, your
ready.
enemies about Jesus? It's few.
It's true everywhere in the world.
So you'll see these little black stick figures over the country of Laos, and the little guy carrying a sack, right? It says 28 in his bag. That means there's one Protestant Christian for every 28 people in the country of Laos. Now, when we started in Laos, it was 1 in 1,000. It's now 1 in 28 in my lifetime. So that's a pretty big change, right? So there's 1 in 28. I mean, I think you could probably tell 28 people about Jesus in your lifetime. That's like they could tell every single living person in the country about Jesus in the next year or two, if you put your mind to it. Yep. In Northeast Thailand, you see a great big bag on his back. It says 500 in that bag. There's one Protestant Christian for every 500 non-believers. And in Cambodia, to the south there, it's 1 in 17. So it's even more reached. And you'll see some arrows going into Northeast Thailand. So being a really smart guy like that I am, I said, look, you guys got a lot of manpower. Why don't you send a few our way and help us get things going over here? So we've been trying to leverage the Lao movement to catalyze movement into Thailand.
And so in the last couple years, we have hosted 14 different groups of Lao believers to come for a 3 to 4 day outreach event. So this was one of the teams that came, both men and women from Laos came and joined Isan teams. And again, the men and women who come are not these great big seminary trained, highly educated people. They're ordinary believers like Peter and John, like you and me. Just ordinary people who know how to tell their testimony, and they've seen fruit in their hometown contexts. And so we're just saying, come on over here where the language and culture are similar, and do the same thing here and help us for a weekend and get us started. And so that's what we've been doing. In 2025, we've had one Lao team that's come so far, and that's a picture here that you see. And an outreach looks like this. So these 10 Lao people will come, right? And they pair up with 10 or 15 Isan workers, and then they are going out 2 by 2, walking down the road in villages that have no known churches, all right? And this is what it looks like. So the believers walk and they pray, and then anybody they meet on the road, they say, hey, do you got a minute? We'd like to tell you something from our own lives, their personal testimony. Hey, did you find that interesting? Let me tell you really quickly an overview of creation to Jesus and judgment. Takes 3-4 minutes, really quick, okay? And so they're just telling the testimonies. They go into the homes of family and friends. And you must be thinking, yeah, Thai people are way more open than Americans. Hey, no, not true.
No, not really.
Not at all. In fact, most Thai people are not interested in Jesus at all. And so these teams will go out. They'll talk to hundreds of people in a weekend because there's multiple people doing it, right? And 95% plus will just say, hey, no thanks. No thanks. But there's always a few people that are prepared. So, Steve, tell us a story about that.
The God prepared. So in this picture, the team is walking down the street, and there's a young man playing on the cell phone in front of his house. Anyone do that here?
Maybe not in
That's
front
the
of the
guy
house,
in the blue
but-
shirt.
Yeah.
Says, hey, what are you guys doing? Where are you going? He say, we're out praying for your village and God's blessing here. Do you got a few minutes to listen to a story about Jesus? And he stood up and said, yes, I've been waiting here for 3 years for someone to come tell me about this. That's a direct quote. He's been watching a preacher on YouTube in the Thai language, and he's kind of hearing stuff.
YouTube.
His older brother was a drug addict and dying, came to his mom, who was sick and bedridden, and said, Mom, I've screwed up my whole life. There's nothing left for me. But I know Jesus is the answer. Take me to Jesus. And Mom's like, what? Like, what do you take you to Jesus? Like, where is he? Like, what? She has no idea. Like, what do I do? This is a woman who doesn't have internet. Okay, she's not Googling and scrolling. I mean, she just lives out in the village. It's like, go find Jesus. Like, I can't do that. But she kind of knew something was right in what he was saying. Older brother does die of a drug overdose, is gone, and Mom feels terrible. In comes this team. Younger brother, who's scrolling on his cell phone, he's figured out who Jesus is finally through YouTube. And he says, I've been waiting for someone to come tell me. Well, they tell him, and he prays to receive the Lord, which is the photo of him standing there. Mom, who's bedridden, you'll see through the windows, the shutters, okay, there's no glass window, okay, it's just shutters are opened, and she's got her hands there, and she's praying to receive the Lord. That followed next. And today there is a small fellowship group that meets in that house every single week. And that young man has been trained how to pray for his friends, and he's out sharing his story with others.
So again, ordinary, unschooled people. It's not like the woman in red and her friend there are that much more eloquent than anybody in here. They were just willing to go. A whole lot of people that day said no until they got to this house. And I'm certain there are people in your lives like that too. They're out there, but it just took time to find them. Tell us another story, Steve.
Okay, another story is about Yai Panom. That's the woman seated there. And she was a spirit medium. So her profession is to call on demonic spirits to possess her, and then she performs services. So if you want to do well on your school entrance exams, you might go to her and ask for a blessing. If you're sick and dying, she intervenes for you, and hopefully you get better. So she's doing demon ceremonies as a service. Well, a little known fact about people in animism like that is their health is terrible, and they usually die young and die a miserable death. And they would like to get out of that profession, but they are sort of under the powers that be, and they can't. And this woman, Yai Panam, was deathly ill about 1.5 years ago and dying at her home. Along came one of the ministry teams, none of the Lao involved here, but one of the local Thai teams came along, prayed for her, and she just slowly started getting better until she completely recovered, at which point she gave her life to following Jesus. Her husband then followed shortly thereafter. Well, she's a woman of great influence because she was one of the main spirit mediums in that area. And she has a lot of disciples of her own in the animism business, okay? And she started to teach them about Jesus, and they also came to faith. And so in comes the Lao team. She was the host of the Lao team in that area. And we went out in pairs, 2 by 2, about 20 of us, all over 3 different villages, talking to people. And a number of us, as we share the gospel, we say, hey, do you know this woman, Yai Panam? And the people would say, yeah, she's dead. Because all they remember is her on her deathbed at home. And so they had just assumed that she had passed away. And I said, no, she's not dead. I had breakfast at her house. She's really healthy. Look at her. She looks great. And so we came back, all 20 of us, regathered at her house. And I said, Auntie, you need to get out in town more. They think you're dead. And I said, did anyone else have that experience? And pretty much pair after pair came back and said, yeah, we heard the same thing. Yeah. And her reaction is what touched my heart. She said, you're darn tootin'. That old Yai Banam is dead and gone. She's down the river. I'm done with her. I don't want to ever go back to anything that was that life. I've found Jesus now, and the life I live now, I live by faith in him. That's exactly what she said. She's never memorized Galatians 2:20, but she quoted it to me from her own life. And that's this unbridled joy of an ordinary person infecting her area. But like Peter and John, she's been with Jesus. And she'd been with us. Here she is, as I greet her.
Yeah, it's these are real stories. We're not making them up. We didn't hear them second and third hand. We know these people. And it's super encouraging because they're just ordinary people. We have been training our colleagues in Thailand to keep track of their progress through maps. Now, you saw the map from Laos earlier. That map was the work of a few people working together over 2 years' time to gather all that data. It is not easy to get this information. It's out there, people know it, but they're not necessarily telling anybody, and these are ordinary, unschooled people, and they don't keep records really well. So, it takes time. But last month, actually just a couple weeks ago, we got this map sent to us from our colleagues in Pearl Province, which is just south of where we live in northeast
Right.
Thailand.
So this is a map in Thailand of one province
one
in
province.
Thailand.
Okay, so there's 53 sub-districts on that map because our vision was a reproducing church in every sub-district, right?
So the map is all those little shapes, those are like sub-districts.
Okay.
Where the colors are.
So when we started, this map would have been red, all red, and there would have been 7 dark green sub-districts where there were existing churches. That's what happened when we started. Since we began training our colleagues and their teams, there are now fully functioning churches in 9 sub-districts. Those are the dark green, right? There are discipleship groups that don't count themselves as full churches yet, but they are meeting and they're being trained to be full churches in 33 of those sub-districts.
And that's the lighter green.
And so there's only 11 sub-districts left that are red with no churches. So in an 8-9 year period, we've turned this whole map from red to green. We and those we've trained and ordinary people going out and telling their story and discipling people. Okay, again, it's not a movement of the highly professional.
All right, let me tell you a bit about my colleague, Dai. Here he is. He's one of our team leaders. He's one of 8 team leaders that I mentor on a weekly basis. And Dai has formed a pioneer church planting team of 9 people, and they started an initial set of 5 daughter churches, all new believers, Buddhist background believers. Some of those daughter churches have now gone on to plant a granddaughter church and a great-granddaughter church in different areas. And about once a quarter, I will meet with Dai and his leadership team to help them evaluate where they're at and what sort of plans they need to make. And so this is a photo of our last planning time, which finished around midnight. Looking back over the last 3 months and looking forward to the next quarter, sort of April, May, June, what are you going to do? And that's kind of my role in their life, is evaluating, planning, encouraging, inspiring, cross-pollinating, bringing people from other areas to meet with them. So let me tell you about one person in Dai's network whose life was changed. And this person's name is Budin. In June 2024, Dai's team went out to share their faith, and they met this man at his home, and he was in terrible pain. He had a bad case of shingles. Anyone here ever had shingles? Well, he got over the shingles, but all over the top of his body and around his neck were these festering sores. I mean, it was a secondary infection. It was awful. He said he wanted to die. Like, he didn't want to even live anymore. He'd gone to the dermatologist, he'd gone to the provincial hospital and tried this and that, and it just kept, spreading. The team in June of last year started to pray for him and his healing. They told him about Jesus and their changed lives. And so he's ready to believe. So he began following the Lord Jesus as his Lord and Savior. And slowly this infection starts to clear up. Not immediately. I met him later in October of that year. And it was obvious that Jesus and God was behind his healing and things clearing up. This photo was taken about 2 months ago in completely You can see some of the residual scarring around his neck and his shoulder, but completely healed. And so he was trained how to share his faith, tell Bible stories, and go out. And he starts telling people his story in 2 or 3 different villages. And he comes across a husband and wife who gave their lives to Christ. And this photo was taken last weekend of the baptism of that couple.
That he led to faith.
He led to faith. So this guy went from, I'd like to commit suicide, to being healed, totally joyful, and now he's seeing spiritual fruit. I met him at the end of March, and I prayed specifically, God, use him. Do your spiritual work through this man now. Give him encouragement that he isn't just kind of hanging out at church, but he's your tool. And then I got this last week, and I said, now, who led that couple to faith? And it was Boone. And I thought, that's exactly what I prayed. An ordinary, unschooled believer going out in faith and seeing God work.
And I think what encourages us the most, whenever we read the Bible and then whenever we meet people, whenever we ourselves go out, God is not looking for the highly professional. He really isn't. He never was. He isn't going to be. He's going to be using people like us and people like Boone and people like Yai Panam, just ordinary people. And you have to understand, most of these people, as you can imagine, know very little about the Lord when they come to him. They're from Buddhist backgrounds. They don't even have the benefit of having grown up in a culture where anybody talked about Jesus. So it's not like, they know a lot and they have deep theological reflection and they can answer everybody's questions. They can't. But that's not, you think about in the Gospels when Jesus healed the demoniac, what did he say? Go home and tell your family how much God has done for you. That's all you got to know. And I am certain that everybody in here, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have some point of contact with Jesus in your life and something he's done for you. You've got something to tell others, and that's exactly what Boone did. That's what Yai Panam has done. That's what we're all supposed to do. That's what Peter and John did. They just talked about what they knew, and they dared to pray for somebody, and God healed that person, right? So we're with Jesus. Let's go out, and let's just put ourselves out there and be obedient, right? Let's tell people what God has done for us. And don't worry that you don't know everything. Think about these people that you've seen today. They know less than you do. And God uses them, and he will use you. That is so encouraging. That is the good news. It's good news for us as people to know him. It's good news for the people that are far from him in your community. So that's what we do. Just a minute. That's what we do.
In just a second.
Oh, go ahead.
Peter and John went to the gate beautiful, and they prayed by faith for a cripple born lame. And they saw God act. And that's where it starts. That God calls upon you and me to just go out in faith and call on him to do something, show up in this person's life, help them, Lord.
So
if that's where it starts.
So things we'd like to ask you to pray for us. We're asking you to pray that leaders that we have trained will increasingly practice effective disciple and church multiplication. Just do the simple things we've taught them, right? If they'll just do it, if we'll just do it, we'll see fruit. And we are asking that every sub-district of Northeast Thailand, Isan, will have a reproducing church. These are the 2 prayer requests. Now, some of you in here get our prayer letter. It's not a newsletter, it's a prayer letter. We would love to have more of you actively praying for us. We send out an update once every 1 to 2 weeks. We send pictures, prayer requests. It's all very up to date. And if you would like to be praying with us for these things that we've talked about on a regular basis, you can come talk to us afterwards. We'll give you the link to sign up. There is a table back there that has some prayer cards, and I guess you have these lovely little offering envelopes. We are in need of financial support. If the Lord has touched your heart and you'd like to give a one-time gift or ongoing support, that's great. The prayer is what undergirds everything. That is the most important thing. And we're hoping God's going to speak to some of you today about that you will join us in serious prayer for these matters. We've been at this 33 years. And it's the reason we're now starting to see so much fruit. Because remember in COVID how everything went like this and then all of a sudden it went this? That was a movement, disease movement.
Viral movement?
A viral movement.
yeah.
Okay, we're at the point in our ministry where we're now seeing the upturn of multiplication in churches in Laos and Thailand. So this is an awesome time to be praying for that. So thank you. Thank you as a church for how you have supported us financially, and those of you that have prayed for us, the encouragement that you've given to us, those of us that have hosted us in your homes. It's all been very helpful to us, and you are a part of everything we've just shared today. So
Yeah, thank you.